All right, everyone, well, welcome, and thanks for sticking with us through what I know has been a long, hopefully really fun days here at I/O. I'm Bridget Goslink. I'm part of the team at google.org. And yesterday, so as Sundar was closing the keynote, so be honest, how many people actually made it that far through the keynote and actually heard the closing? Okay, that's not bad. Good job, team. If you haven't, I think it's worth watching. Is this relevant to the content that we have here today? He talked about the power of applying the most cutting-edge computing that we have to the world's biggest challenges. And at google.org, we fund and support organizations who are really working to make that promise, the promise of technology to have social impact, a reality. And it was interesting for me because yesterday's keynote actually brought me a little bit full circle back to last year's keynote. In last year's keynote, there was a video that profiled a man from Brazil named Carlos, who is working on a piece of assistive technology for his daughter. And the organizations that we're here working with here today, that are here to share their work with you, as well as many of the organizations we supported last year, actually were all working to tackle a specific set of challenges facing people with disabilities. So first, a quick poll. How many people here either identify themselves as having a disability or know someone who does?
Whoa, okay.
It's a lot of people. And in fact, as many of you probably know, 1 in 7 people in the world have some form of disability. It's 1 billion people. It's the world's largest minority. And we know that technology has the potential to help increase independence and opportunity for people with disabilities, for that 1 billion people. Something very exciting is happening outside.
And here.
And here, which is great. So last year at I/O, we actually announced plans to award $20 million in funding and google.org funding and support for nonprofit organizations who were trying to help push forward independence and opportunity. We launched an open call, and we were really blown away by the response we got. We had more than 1,000 applications from 88 countries. One of those applications was from Carlos. And Carlos actually proposed to use natural language processing and context, a couple of things we heard a little bit about here so far at I/O, to improve the assistive communication software that he was building so that his daughter could communicate. She has communication limitations as someone with cerebral palsy. And so, for example, he wanted the software to be able to, in the morning when she wakes up, suggest on her picture board breakfast items because it knows that she's at home and she knows in the morning she wants breakfast. She shouldn't have to navigate in to find these, through several menus to find these options so that she can say that she wants oatmeal. So it was really exciting for me to hear Sundar talking about the promise of those practices. And we're excited to be funding Carlos to do that work. And actually what he'll be building will all be open source so that other assistive devices and software can hopefully benefit from the same work that he's using. And I'm thrilled to have here today 4 other organizations who won funding through that challenge, who are all working on really hard problems. If you want to check out any of the other projects and ideas that we funded, they're all available. You can check them out at g.co/disabilities. So with that, I will turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit more about their work. We'll talk about who they are as people, technologists working on social challenges. Hopefully that's interesting to some of you. And what the problem is that they're working on, as well as their approach to trying to solve that challenge. Arnon, you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here. My name is Arnon Zamir. I come from Tel Aviv, where I run an organization named TOM. That's T-O-M. Myself, I'm a software developer by profession and by occupational history, but in the last 3 years or so, I've been running social technology involved projects. The crown jewel of those is TOM. What we do is TOM is kind of create an umbrella system for technologists to be involved in assisting and empowering people with disabilities. We're looking for challenges that can, and therefore should, be addressed by technology. And we're looking for 2 main cases. Either where a solution for a challenge does not exist, or where a solution exists, but it is not affordable to many people due to either proprietary rights on the design or other reasons, usually customization, which makes products very expensive. We are looking for technology makers that are willing to put some time into development of solutions and then people with disabilities and experts, which we call need knowers, those that can describe the need. And we facilitate the meeting of the two. We're creating very high-end, very complicated makeathons, marathons of makers, and then taking the products of those into continuous development products, which we call developer groups. And finally, with the generous assistance of google.org, we're able to create a web platform that helps all of those take a path to market, again, as a non-profit organization on an open source version of everything that we require and develop. That's the one-liner. A long line.
Great, Ginny?
Hi, I'm Ginny Grant. I'm a senior product manager at Benetech. And in my history, I've been a technologist for many years. I was also a classroom teacher and volunteer. And when I came to Benetech about 4.5 years ago, I found my calling, because Benetech is a completely different kind of technology company. Like you, we look for opportunities where we can serve communities that otherwise are not as well served, whether it's in an environmental sense. We have tools which allow conservationists to report issues with their ecosystem. We also have secure tools that our human rights advocates are able to use to report human rights violations around the world. And then in the group that I'm most focused on, our global literacy team, we serve over 400,000 members who are able to get our books in an accessible format for their needs, whether it's because they have a vision impairment or they've lost the use of a limb, perhaps whether it's cerebral palsy, or they've served their country and have lost an arm, had a stroke, or they also have a learning difference, a disability such as dyslexia that causes the words not to form properly unless they're served in multimodal, both visual and auditorily and highlighted. So it's really exciting that we're able to bring those kind of technologies to people around the world. And I'll be talking more later about the details of how we're doing that.
Go ahead, Holger.
All right, hello, my name is Holger. I'm the co-founder of wheelmap.org. My background is I have a degree in design and worked in product management a lot. The problem I found with my best friend Raul, who's using an electric wheelchair, is where can we actually hang out and have a coffee, go to a bar, mundane things. And we think that inclusion means that everybody should take part in daily life equally, no matter if they have a disability or not. So what I figured, I was like, why do we always go to the cafe in your area? Why don't you come to my neighborhood? So we are from Berlin, Germany. And we have lots of old buildings. And what I didn't know before is that lots of these buildings have steps in the entrance, so you cannot get in when you have an electric wheelchair. So he said, I don't know where I can get in your neighborhood. I'm like, yeah, but you cannot be the only wheelchair user in Berlin or in this neighborhood. So what about building an app where everybody can look around and mark places, physical places like restaurants, cafes, anything, any public places, and say, yes, they are wheelchair accessible, or no, they are not wheelchair accessible. So we built that. It's like 5 years ago, and it's now the largest data set in the world with more than 650,000 marked places, and we're online in 22 languages. So what we do now is that we want to bring this to other location-based services and Maps apps, so that they can augment their service with wheelchair accessibility, but not only our sources, but from other nonprofits, from other data sources as well. So that's for me.
Yeah, go ahead, Umi.
Hi all, I'm Umi, or my full name is Umesh Pandya. I've been a designer for 15 years, and we work out of London, and I look after an organization called Wayfinder. And Wayfinder's mission is to empower vision-impaired people to independently navigate the world, and that's our sole existence. That's what we do day in, day out. Now, what we do, we'll be quite specific here, is that we do not create an app, right? We're creating an open standard for audio-based wayfinding. And what that allows people to do is it allows venue owners, such as like transport networks and retailers, and navigation app developers, have a common language together, right? So they can look at the standard and understand how they might make their space accessible for indoor navigation for blind people. Now, currently, we are using BLE, so we're using Bluetooth beacons to allow turn-by-turn navigation. An example of that is some installations that we've done in London, and we've done some installations over in Sydney. And that tells the user, walk straight or turn right or go down an escalator. And all of these instructions and guidelines are baked into the guidelines that we published last week in the open standard.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for those overviews all. I think I'd like to start with a discussion about inclusive design in general, and in specific, how we can think about technology really being part of the answer for some of the challenges that face people with disabilities. And obviously, that's the core of what you all do, but I thought it would be useful for this audience to perhaps give a little bit more of the advice that you would have for really designing with this user population in mind. Ginny, do you want to start us off?
All right. So a number of things. The first thing off is start early. Think about accessibility as soon as you can, right with usability. You never want to bake it back in later. You can't change the ingredients. It's so much better to start up front. So look for all the design standards. And I know other people are going to be talking about this too, but thinking about the POUR, I believe, is a good acronym, the POUR. So go look that up, Google that. But making sure that every illustration or image that's on your web page or in your tool is accessible to all. Turn off the volume, turn down the monitor, or even try to use an oven mitt to try to navigate. If you had to use a switch and you just needed to be able to move around, you can't assume that people have all the dexterity that some others do. So work that in from the very get-go. There's, let's see, there are lots of other things, but also work through standards. Umi, you mentioned that earlier. Try to improve the standards so that more people can spread that capability of technology that is accessible. I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, definitely. Arnon, do you want to add anything?
I'd like to tap into that, and that's a very important part of creating anything inclusive and anything accessible, is being in a constant dialogue with the people that need it. One of the principles, which is articulated in the saying from Holger, nothing about us without us. Don't do anything with someone, always do, don't do anything for someone, always do with someone. When we work at TOM, we define our goal and our methodology as facilitating the meeting points of challenge and talent. We bring people that can donate some of their time, and we sit them in the same room, in the same table, with the people that can understand the challenge. So imagine that you were developing an app, a productivity app for young mothers. The first thing you would have done is go meet young mothers and analyze their productivity challenges, right? That's obvious for every development team working on designing the new app. The same thing is true with anything from wheelchair accessibility to visual impairments aids to applications for people with disabilities. Just have your client, the need knower, with you. And another small angle on that is that accessibility is one thing. Design your application to be accessible for people with certain limitations. Another angle can be when you're meeting with a new technology or when you're creating a new technology. One of the things we found out, some people right away think, what can this technology do for people with disabilities? So if we have a new visual design scheme, or if we have a contextual engine, or if we have anything new happening in the big technology world, right away we think, how can this be put in use for people with disabilities? There is no advancement today that is not tied with technology, and this is not an exception.
Right, really building in as a use case and not as an add-on or something that you might need a whole different piece of software for a different device. Yeah, I think that really speaks to that inclusive nature. I think for people who maybe feel uncertain about how to get close to those user needs, which I think can sometimes feel like a barrier when you're trying to develop solutions in this space, what advice would you all have for the best way to sort of get close, get proximate to those needs? Holger, did you?
Me or you? Want to start?
I can go. Yeah, so the way that we do it day in, day out is we use a methodology called build, measure, learn, right? And we also use user-centered design in everything we do. So, for example, in some of the stations that we've done, we've worked with users over 3 weeks. So every station we've done, every installation we've done, 25 users. We bring them in, we test with them one-to-one, we iterate. That means that we get 5 iterations of our product in one day. That's pretty amazing. Over the course of 3 weeks, we've got something that's validated. All of that information gets pushed up into standard. And then we have an awesome backlog of stuff that we need to attack in our next round of user testing. So having users at the center is really useful. Prototyping is a really good way to manage uncertainty as well. So if you're developing something and you're kind of unsure, am I doing the right thing or should I be doing it this way? Just get the users in the room. Try and hunt out the actual people that have the needs that you can help support. If you can't get access to them, try and find kind of experts that can help with that, and then kind of just work with them. And just the core thing is just bake them into your process and bake them into your organization and how you do it. You can't do it at a distance. It's really difficult. You have to have them with you at all times.
Yeah, I mean, I think Holger's story with founding the organization that he founded with Raul is obviously the sort of most visceral way that you could imagine doing that, right? Just hire someone and have them on your staff. But if you can't do that, I think some of the things that you suggested, Umi, are quite useful. You also mentioned this idea of experimentation, and this is actually beyond this space something that I think is interesting in the social impact sector in general. So we actually don't think a lot of it in the same way that we talk about launching and iterate in Google and in many of the technology that we build. We don't think as much about it, I think, sometimes when it comes to social challenges. And that's because there are some, I think, real barriers to that. It's something that we really encourage in the work that we support and fund. And a lot of the groups that are represented here are trying to do that. I wonder if you all could just give some reflections on some of the difficulties and barriers to doing that well, given that you're trying to, with your work, also have great social impact.
Yeah, maybe I can give an example. So there were other nonprofit organizations who tried to do what we did with finding wheelchair-accessible places. And they're experts in their needs, as we said before. But they're not experts in building Android apps, for example, or web apps, or making it scale. So our data set is based on OpenStreetMap. So you have to know this exists. You have to be able to access the APIs and to build around it, make it stable, maybe interact with others, and have a good design. So I think where things come together is also to learn from each other, and so that you as an expert in software development have a beginner's mindset in learning about people with disabilities and vice versa. So I think there's always something people can help each other with, basically.
Yeah, Umi, did you have anything to add there?
Sure. What we've learned along the journey, because we're a joint venture between a digital product studio, yay, a digital product studio and a charity. So it's a joint venture between us two and the Royal London Society for Blind People. We're finding we're learning both ways, right? So to Holger's point, we're bringing kind of digital product, design processes and all that in. But what the RLSB are helping us understand is kind of the user and the social impact. So when we talk about measure in build, measure, learn, it kind of gets expanded a little bit. So when you talk about measure in the design context, we can measure usability, whether the instructions are correct, how many people are using it, regular stuff like that, right? However, wow. If you're talking about kind of measurement in a kind of social impact space, is that how do you measure how someone felt before they used the Wayfinder-enabled system? How do they feel after it? How have we moved them along that journey to a kind of better well-being? These are kind of interesting challenges that kind of take us out of a product space and more into kind of like a social impact space. And these are exciting times for us when we start to unpack these things.
I don't know if the people on live stream can hear the cheering that's happening outside this tent, but this is apparently a very popular discussion. We're getting a lot of support right now.
I'd love to add another.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ginny, I think that you all have some great experience with this idea of iterating.
Well, so Bookshare and Benetech have been around actually for about 12 years before the Kindle and those other electronic books, when we first started to make books available online. And our whole mantra was about making books accessible in the digital format that they need, and people can get it through the web. And then we've been starting, especially as we've been expanding out to other countries and places that aren't as economically affluent, And it's been fascinating to see old technology that still has IE6 embedded right in it, and how do we work with that? Or places that, well, now they're actually putting their library of books on CDs and sending them out through the postal service every month to their patrons, and we're trying to change socially the cultural as well as technology. So we're definitely hitting constraints where people who may not be as economically advantaged can't switch out technology as fast as we here, especially in this wonderful Silicon Valley, think it can happen. But we're trying to make the strides to get people to that point, again, working with and not for. So it's been an interesting challenge.
What are some of the strategies that you've taken to try to deal with that? Obviously, some of it is updating your software to work all the way back to IE6, so congratulations to you.
Well, and on that note, we actually last November had to finally cut the umbilical cord.
I think they're now at 8, though, so that's probably not so serious.
Sorry.
So they are out of the nest now, but they had other ways of doing it. It just, unfortunately, there were some people who were still so accustomed, and some of it is comfort levels, because people have become accustomed to doing things the way they've been doing things. And so it's been an interesting journey to work with people. And again, baby steps of getting people to try something out, feel comfortable. I love the idea of not just looking at metrics from a purely objective perspective, but that subjective nature as well. It's really cool. So I guess that's some of it, is that we work with open source as well, so that we want to make sure that other people can use pieces that we build out. We have a MathML cloud that we're evolving, that people will be able to help expand and then use the MathML that's there in that repository to reference
What's MathML, Ginny?
Sorry?
What is MathML?
MathML. So, sorry. So imagine that you're looking at a textbook that has a cool equation that's all laid out there, and as a visual user you can see that, but what if you can't see it? You have to hear it. And so if it's spoken out in a markup language that can be translated and voiced. ChemML, chemistry, has the same kind of concepts. And so being able to refer to those different image description ways that you can describe what to a visual person is just an image, makes it accessible to all. Thank you.
So you touched on something there that I guess I touched on as well in my intro in talking about what Carlos is doing, which is this idea of open source. And one of the things that we really promote as Google.org is the idea of openness, and it's not just for the principle of it, but also because it's really critical to see some of these solutions come to scale. So when we think about the size of the problems that people are working on, that these organizations and others are working on, we also have to think about how could we imagine one organization solving this, and frankly, you can't.
Right.
So actually all of these organizations, and most of those that we support, are actually working to have people actively adopt what it is that they're doing outside of sort of the walls of their organization, which in many ways is very different than how I think about a for-profit enterprise, right? In some ways, there's a wall built up in order to protect that, and you ideally don't see a lot of copycats. Obviously cuts into your revenue. This is sort of a flipped model with what we're working with. I would love you all to just maybe explore some of the challenges of that. Obviously, there are challenges. I know that if you just say there aren't, we've talked about them. And also some of what you've seen to be successful in trying to drive that kind of adoption beyond your own walls.
Yeah.
Why don't you start off?
Yeah, I'll be happy to share, because that's a huge part of what we're doing. So imagine that you're building a product and then it's relatively successful. You want it to grow up and you want to scale it up. And now imagine that your goal in this is not to sell a product, but to actually transform a situation, to move the needle. In our case, our goal is to move the needle in accessibility to assistive technology. So we want that everywhere in the world, assistive technology, whatever that is for your needs, will be available for you regardless of how much money you have or where you are. Obviously, being a team of 7 people now, 3 people until recently, we cannot do that alone. So from the ground up, the whole mechanism behind our work at TOM is community engagement. We actively work to transfer ownership from our own team to the teams that are working on specific projects. So if we have, for example, a tablet-based accessibility app, we don't want to direct the team. We don't want to own the product. We just want to support them as they own the process and the results. And this is true with 3D printed prosthetic arms that we are doing, sometimes based on open source existing models, or with wheelchair adjustments, or everything else. And then we actively incorporate into our system mechanisms for replication. We are building a website that is going to be an eBay-style experience, a marketplace experience for people to actively go online and download our material and copy it and transform it. And we are heavily encouraging teams to do this. So one of our challenges is, on one hand, how do we get as many groups in the world as possible, take our products, transform them to their local needs, and implement them. On the other hand, make sure that no one is doing something unwanted with it. What will something unwanted be? Use it for something that we consider immoral or just irresponsible. Or use it.
Commercializing and going against your affordability principles, for example.
So commercializing is an interesting aspect, because we are not against commercializing as long as you keep the open source files available. So some commercialization models can work as open source products. Some of you might know Arduino, WordPress, and a semi-famous operation system called Android you might have heard of. They're all based on open source projects, or they are open source projects, and they're relatively profitable. So that's not necessarily a contradiction. But then again, if someone tries to close what we are doing and not share it with the world at all, we'll have a problem with that. Organization-wise, we had, a couple of months ago, we had a team in Canada, very strong, very enthusiastic about Tom's work, running around, running a makeathon of their own, working now on the second one, and building a grounds-up operation in a city called Calgary in the west coast of Canada. And they went ahead and registered an organization named Tikkun Olam Makers, which is TOM, T-O-M, that's our name. And we said, okay, how do we do that? And in case, Richard, you're watching the video, hi. One approach, the commercial approach, would be, this is our name, you're not going to do anything with that, we are going to protect ourselves against this infringement. But then we want the community to grow. So it's a constant debate, a constant dialogue with them, understanding the limits. And remember that we are very young, we've been doing this for about 2 years, and there's no other organization to look and learn from, almost none. So it's a constant balancing and pushing back and forward process. Right now, very challenging, but very satisfying, and we are seeing growth.
Actually, also, what we learned is that, you know, I have a lot of friends in Berlin who are working in startups and saying, yeah, what's the business model behind Wheelmap? Would you put advertising on it, or do you have an API and sell by, you know, the 1,000 maps you serve or something like that? But we really made the hard decision. We are a non-profit organization, so we will never be millionaires. We are out there to save the world. So what we want to maximize is impact. So the more people use it, the better. If I put a price tag on this, it will hinder my goal, and we will potentially not reach as many people. So our apps are free. We want to encourage that data is open and free. At least it's available in an understandable format so that people can understand where to find this. Because once you decide that's your goal, you should put all the efforts into that. And what we learned along the way, working also with organizations like Google and other commercial organizations, is that they appreciate what we do and want to help, and they help us do this along the way. So, for example, we are doing a project with the German railway system, so the Railway Corporation. It's an organization with 300,000 employees. And what we're interested in is you don't want to get stuck at a train station because the elevator is not working. So you need real-time information on, is an elevator working or not, a lift. So we built a project to highlight that, but there was no good real-time API from them. So we built something on scraping and stealing actually from their website, and to show that demo that what we could do. And instead of like hating us, they said like, hey, let's talk. How can we make this happen? We don't really understand. And now they have a full-fledged open data initiative to make this happen. And now they have a real-time API which can be included in all travel planning around Germany. And that's our goal. So, and actually, now we are like kind of consulting them, and they pay us for this. So, and that's maybe how good things can happen, and we maximize our impact. So if we would charge for that, we wouldn't have this liaison, this relationship in the first place. So it's very different from, well, in one hand, it's also we need to make, we must not go bankrupt, otherwise we cannot save the world, but otherwise we need to trust in our cause.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of iterate on both your points, is that we believe that kind of adoption of the standard directly equals to the social impact. And we know that as an organization, we can't do it all, right? We need to bring together transport networks or built environment owners. We need to bring together charities and vision impaired people, so organizations that look after vision impaired people. We need to bring together the software and the hardware guys that work in the indoor navigation space. We need to bring in the researchers and the universities that are kind of dealing with this. And so we've created the Wayfinder community, where we've got a good amount of members in there now, and we're kind of scaling that up because we have now kind of the second part of our standard development, which we released last week, is to now work together with these organizations to develop the standard together. So our potential clients or the potential people that will increase the adoption are also baked into the process of creating our product. So not only our users are part of our process, our customers are also part of our process to send that out and develop our product. So we know that we're kind of making something that's actually usable and somebody needs, rather than something that's a pure guess. And that's why it's quite important to have these people really close and work alongside you in a kind of a collaborative manner.
Yeah. So I feel like you guys are making this sound really easy to save the world. Which is great, because we would love to have more people working on this. But I know it's also pretty hard, and that you all have had a bunch of challenges that you're experiencing all the time. And I think some of these are parts of those, but would love to just hear a couple of stories about some of the hard part of this, what's really been a really challenging problem that you've encountered, and how you've sort of worked through that, or the craziest day at work that you had, or something like that.
Oh.
Or go ahead.
Okay, all right, I could do one.
Sure.
I mean, there's many crazy days at work, but that's why we all do it. We love it. When Bookshare started, there was obviously a concern, or almost a threat felt by the publishing industry, that we were somehow stealing the intellectual property, very much in the sense of music, if you think about some of the shared music services that there were for a while. But Benetech is very, very clear on digital rights management and policies, and so we've had to really step up our game there and prove that we're not trying to share intellectual property. It's very important. But then the other thing we've done is to your point, we've really worked with the publishing industry to produce standards that they will then in turn start to build out all of the books and magazines and literature that, with these standards, that will enable everybody to be able to use them, born accessible and accessible for all. So I think it was a huge challenge at the beginning, and we now have publishers coming to us saying, how can we get into your group and in fact teach us how to make the books that we make more accessible. So that has been a huge switch, again, needle moving. So. Do you want to add?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we move daily between kind of granular to high level. And what I mean by that is how we develop the product, what the process is, what's the upgrades we're going to do, to the bigger level, which is how are we going to change policy in London, right? Especially right around the kind of...
Just you, I mean, you're going to do it yourself.
Right. So how do we deal with that when you're kind of flipping between these two things? And it's really hard, because when you're used to making digital products, which you can kind of just evolve overnight or every hour, and then you're working with a system that changes over years, how do you ensure that you're going to be still alive to see the fruits of your labor, and then see whether it's actually delivered an impact? So these are the kind of things that kind of bounce around in our minds, which are like, okay, are we using our time efficiently? And where do we push our efforts? Before, when we would work for kind of clients and do products, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to push these pixels around and make it really nice and da-da-da. But when it becomes more about kind of delivering this change, it's all about actually, you know what, some of that can stay there. Don't worry about that. We need to deliver this because this is the impact that it's going to directly deliver. So it's kind of a flip, been quite a flip for us.
So one small thing I can tell you, maybe you as app developers can relate to, is that bad quality is like being a charity is not an excuse for bad quality. So we, for example, we didn't have a lot of testing and we were learning it along the way. And in the beginning, when you didn't allow location and you were opening the app, you were getting like weird error messages like something's not working and you have to click it 5 times to get rid of it. And then maybe you don't even have point of interest or something like that. So we didn't notice that somebody would do this because we didn't think of it. And we're stupid, maybe. But we immediately got like 1-star reviews on the App Store for a free app run by a charity on donors' money. And we were like, what? You know, like we're putting our heart into this and you're still like immediately like 1 star, 1 star, 1 star. So, but actually, it's also good because it proves the point that they deserve good quality and that we must deliver this as well, you know, and we're just considered another app is actually an achievement that is not like, you know, it's kind of crappy, but it's charity. That's not anymore. It has to be well designed and it has to work, and worked a long time on doing this, and I'm proud that the apps are working now, and you don't have to have location enabled all the time.
Yeah, I think we sometimes have this myth a little bit that either products that are done through nonprofits can be fine, but not great, or that doing this type of work is actually easier than harder. I think sometimes it's both. It's fun and you get inspired by it, but it's also a lot of hard challenges. I would love for you all who have made sort of this move from being technologists in maybe a more mainstream environment to doing things that are really using those technical skills for good. You know, inspire some people out here to do the same who are listening to this. To you all speak. Arnon, this is sort of what you do every day, so maybe I'll turn to you to start.
So, first of all, yes, this is what we do every day, and we have a very simple strategic approach to that, which is do and do now. We are very open for technologists and half technologists and sometimes non-technologists to join us and participate in a development of some feature in a product. And as a person which is partially our inspiration, John Schul from Enable says, a prosthetic arm that is 3D printed needs to just be significantly, diminishingly better than nothing. And we're very good at bringing together people to develop solutions that are diminishingly better than nothing, and then very, very better than nothing. And you're all invited to join, because you don't need to change everything. We're not asking people to stop what they're doing and start doing just work for society. We're asking people to donate either 3 days in the year or 3 hours in the week. And we have a non-written agreement with them. You give us your time, and we'll make sure it's dedicated to something very good, which is many times going to sustain and move forward and grow and change somebody's life. And the world is full with opportunities to do good things and to marvel in them. And I'm very happy to engage everyone online and offline in our activity. I want to tell a very short story about a product that you can see in a booth here.
It's in the Access and Empathy Sandbox, if you haven't made it back.
That booth. There's a product called the Grabber. It looks like a pair of clamps with a mouth-operated thingy at the end. It was created with a friend named Kim from Northern California. She was born, unfortunately, with no limbs, and she had some difficulties reaching things that are far from her sight, from her reach by her mouth. And it was created exactly to her measurements, to her need, and relatively successful. About a week ago, I got this video over WhatsApp showing the same instrument transferred into something new, kind of forked, like a software, open source software can be forked. The guys took it, and on the clamps, they put the hands of a doll and the head of a doll and 2 bells at the end. And now it is a clapping doll that is used for a parent which is disabled from the neck down to play with his 4-year-old daughter. He's holding it, and he can clap the hands, which he couldn't before. Exactly the same mechanism, different interpretation. We could never have gotten to this without open source accessibility and without the community being so daring and doing stuff we're never thinking of. So join us.
Jenny, what advice would you have, and what's one thing that people can do kind of walking out of here?
Well, besides making sure that anything you build can be used with a single oven mitt, or turn off your monitor and your volume to make sure that anyone and everyone can use whatever you're building, which is going to be great quality. Of course, there's always applying to Benetech. We have multiple jobs open that would do all kinds of great things. But I would say definitely build out your ecosystem, get to know people who care about this, and demand accessibility everywhere.
I think what we learned is that we can, if you want to do something and support a nonprofit organization like ours or like the others, empathy is fine, but what we do need is your expertise. So one idea is, like, in the beginning we had on our website, like, you want to become a hero, help us, something like that, like contact us. So we got random people wanting to volunteer. We changed this completely. We said, like, we need a JavaScript front-end expert in design, like 3 months unpaid, 1 day per week, something like that, for a nonprofit organization as a volunteer work. So we're blunt and upfront about this. And we actually got something like applications from really cool people we hired later, because it was sometimes the first moment when they could say, hey, I can play with this cool framework for the first time and actually have an impact. For one story is that the first Android app was built by our users who were hating that we only were on iOS. And we said, like, well, we don't have the means to pay somebody to do this. And we said, well, I can bring you together. And actually, 3 people came together to build this remotely, and one actually quit his day job and became a freelance Android developer afterwards, because he had this reference of a successful app with a worldwide impact. And building things like, we completely trusted this person because there was nothing. What can go wrong? We have a backend, we have an API, cool things can be built. And I think this is like where you should come from. I'm interested in this framework, in this new technology. I always wanted to try this and that out. So there are places where you can Google, or where you can search for like charities or things you can help by the programming language you prefer, for example. We, for example, we have on GitHub all our source code, and we have issues which have the tag easy and mentored, so that we can bring new contributors on board and not just say, like, hey, check out the whole thing and you will figure it out. That's not how it works. Start with something easy, and if it's fun, do more. As soon as as you contribute and submit a pull request, and then we will look at it and merge it, and maybe you do more. So think of what you like to work on, what's fun for you. And then I think this collaboration will work really well.
I'll keep it short. I think it's going to be quite immediate, right? I'm assuming that most of you are developers. I've done this before. It might get you fired, or it might not get you fired. But anyway, you're the guys that kind of actually implement the code. Now, implementing accessibility into it is not a hard effort. So start rogue, right? Your client gives you a project, just start implementing it in there. It's not hard. We've done it before. Now, then you can then go back to your client and say, look, actually, like 70% of your app is now accessible. Do you want to make the rest of it accessible? I've seen that work many times before, so I'd recommend you go and do that immediately, right? From a Wayfinder point of view, we're an open standard, right? So we want you guys to come along, and if you can, contribute towards it. If you can, share, and we would love your feedback. And this is kind of how we want to grow. So kind of hit us up at wayfinder.net. That's Wayfinder without the E, /standard, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
Perfect. Well, one of my favorite parts of my job is that I have the privilege to meet passionate people who are working to use technology for social good. So I'm glad to have been able to share that privilege a little bit with you all today. Please join me in thanking our panelists, and let's go hang out with the fun people outside.